This is our very first podcast for Badass Women in Climate. I am so excited to introduce Faith Flanigan. She's the 360 lead for Regenerosity and the Operations and Mycelia lead for Spherical. And this is our first podcast. I'm thrilled that you're here. Thank you. Thank you. We've got our new recording studio all put together. And what we wanted to do with this series is highlight badass women in climate. We're going to do a mini series of 10 episodes and just highlighting work that badass women are doing across the world that is making a difference for climate.
First, I just want to say thank you for inviting me as the first podcastee or the first speaker for your podcast. It's such an honor to be here, and I'm really excited to hear about the other speakers that are coming in the future, and excited to share what I'm up to.
You're working on such cool shit. Is swearing okay? I don't know. Is swearing okay? Cool. So a little bit of background on you and how we met. We met at Buckminster Fuller Institute's 40th birthday party, 40th anniversary party,
yeah.
40th anniversary.
Yeah.
That was a really incredible event, and you were on stage showing barren land that then became incredibly lush agroforestry, supporting communities and creating these cyclical structures. And I was blown away because I think what you were saying on stage was that you can do it in like 6 months. Like it doesn't take long for us to fix some of the mess we've gotten ourselves into with the right intention and community and everything that you're creating.
Right.
So that is why I wanted you to be my first, because I'm like, Faith is so cool. She's doing such cool shit.
Beautiful. So I can speak a little bit about my experience with the Buckminster Fuller Institute. I was there for about 6 years. I started as the operations director there and then moved into the interim executive director. And from there, we started Regenerosity, which was kind of a dream, or it was a dream actually, of mine and the previous executive director, Amanda Ravenhill, and Ruth Andrade and James Atherton, who also run Lesh Cosmetics Spring Prize.
Okay.
So it was the four of us that kind of came together to build this dream. I'm going to call it a dream still.
Yeah.
Which was a program out of the Buckminster Fuller Institute for about 4 years.
And for people that don't know anything about the Buckminster Fuller Institute, could you give just a couple sentences on what that is and why that's valuable and how this could come out of that?
Yeah, so the Buckminster Fuller Institute was started in the 1980s, in 1986, out of kind of a legacy of Buckminster Fuller. And if you don't know who Buckminster Fuller is, you should definitely look him up because he's quite a luminary and a visionary of his time. He saw the future 50 years before his time. And the things that he said or wrote about are all coming to fruition now. And he believed that our education would shift and change, and that we would become more automated. We would build systems that move beyond the state of human interconnection with them. So he kind of foresaw AI even before AI was even existed. So he died in the 80s, in 1986, and the Institute was started as a organization based on his legacy, and then moved into a systems thinking and systems change organization. So we ran a challenge called the Fuller Challenge for 10 years, really based on systems change. And there's a whole number of practices and principles that Buckminster Buckminster Fuller created and launched into the world. And part of that is aligned with synergy and how we interconnect and how we have that interconnectivity throughout the world. He believed that we had all of the resources we need on Earth to take care of 100% of humanity in a very short time if we could just work through our egos and move beyond where we're at in the world.
Yeah.
So I think, part of that is like, how do we move beyond this win-lose challenge of a challenge program or a challenge prize? And we had over 400 applicants that came into the Buckminster Fuller challenge program over 10 years. And those were, some of the most incredible projects in the world, and really changing the state of the world for where they were at in their place. And so the desire to build and grow Regenerosity was really around, how do we actually create capacity, or not even create, how do we support the capacity building of initiatives and grassroots projects to actually continue to grow and become larger and expand their network and extend their communities into regional or national hubs so that they can actually have a bigger and greater impact. And since then, we've actually launched our first cohort in 2020 to 2023. It's a 2-year cohort, but it lasted to 2023.
Why? What was happening in the world?
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's a couple of hiccups here. I did go to Uganda in 2022 to see some of the projects on the ground. And most of the projects that we're working with are really based on land-based projects around regenerative agriculture and building livelihoods, and food sovereignty programs around kitchen gardens, like the project you saw in at the Buckminster Fuller 40th anniversary was a project for Earth Forever, from Earth Forever. And they are creating these amazing food forests all throughout different swaths of land of India. And the change is visceral. I mean, you can actually see the change on the ground, which is, to me, one of the most empowering parts of working at Regenerosity, is being able to support these projects to do the work that they need to do in the world and create not only resources, but also a knowledge sharing hub that they get to build on each other's challenges and solutions and work together. And then also we get the opportunity to tell those stories and to introduce them to other funders and other opportunities and build their networks. And part of this is, how do we create the larger movement around building, a more regenerative world. Regenerative is kind of a funny word, but it's a word that a lot of us can kind of grasp at this point. But how do we build agroecology systems and food sovereign systems and economies of scale, and organizations that have the capacity to actually grow their work in a way that actually feeds the communities around them?
Yeah.
I saw that in real time in Uganda, and it was incredible and eye-opening. So
that must be some of your in all the day-to-day, getting all your tasks done, getting all your emails checked, and getting the funders, that can be just so draining. I would imagine that being on the ground and seeing the impact is feeds a lot of the resilience and capacity to keep doing this sort of work.
Yeah, I think the storytelling is really an incredible part of this work. And I think you don't know until you have that feeling of, what are people's lived experiences? How are people living in these spaces, and how are they dealing on a daily basis with the state of climate, or the state of the fact that many of these people that we work with, the communities that we work with, are based in refugee settlements. And so they are living on less than $1 a day and less than $1 a month, honestly. And so they are generally smallhold farmers that are given a swath of land. Some of them have never been farmers before. And so they're learning to farm.
Oh, wow.
As they move into a new country and try to take up this new life, and also are dealing with the trauma of being refugees. So one of the organizations that we work really closely with, Yise Uganda, is doing this amazing work in Naki Valley, which is one of the biggest refugee camps in Uganda. And they are transitioning the state of these gardens because there's no rain in this certain part of Uganda, which is crazy because outside of Naki Valley, it rains everywhere. But that is an impact from climate, and they've had to clear swaths of land, so there's no rain now, and so they're kind of barren deserts where very little grows. And if you have an unstable climate year, which we're headed towards on a yearly basis, on an annual basis, more people lose their crops, and so there's nothing that they can eat. There's literally no food for them. So the work to transition these farms to permaculture farms or syntropic agriculture farms, where they're actually creating large swaths of gardens that they can sell and use to gain some kind of like income, is really incredible.
Yeah.
We've partnered them with Ramwanja Rural Foundation, which is a also a refugee-based organization. Ricky is from the Congo and just amazing, doing incredible work in mushroom cultivation. So it's also like, how do we connect these organizations together to grow the movement?
Yeah. God, that's incredible. Could you tell me how you got your start in this sort of regenerative work that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I have been connected to nature my whole life. I grew up off the grid, both in California and Alaska, in Homer, Alaska. My parents are back to landers. We built our house based on the Whole Earth Catalog.
I don't know what that is. What's the Whole Earth Catalog?
The Whole Earth Catalog came a long time ago in the 70s, before YouTube. It was like kind of like a how to do it, how to build things, how to go back to the land and be from the earth. Buckminster Fuller was featured many times, and Richard Brand created the Whole Earth Catalog, and kind of a seminal magazine that came out in the 70s that really connected people to the land.
Was it like a how-to?
Exactly. It was a how-to guide to how to build, your own.
So it wasn't like a Sears catalog where you could like get your tractor and get your like pop-up house, right?
Oh,
it was like a guidance.
It was more like a manual, but also a magazine as well. So my parents used it quite a bit when we were growing up, and we have all of the issues of the Whole Earth Catalog. So I grew up with this really systems thinking kind of inoculation as a child. We had a geodesic dome on our property. In Alaska, we built like an Earth-based spaceship when I was a kid, and we lived on 40 acres.
That sounds amazing.
It was wild. So from there, I traveled for a couple of years to New Zealand and Australia and worked on farms, and then went to Humboldt State and studied environmental science, as you do. I was a deep activist, is what I like to call myself, because I worked with Earth First.
Do we not say that?
No, it's fine.
Are they controversial?
They're very controversial. Yeah, they lock themselves to gates, and I was at the WTO.
Yeah.
I did some serious activism work there, and I don't know if you know.
Did you lock yourself to a gate?
I locked myself in many different forms, places, to roads and gates, and
that is so badass.
I was a comms person for them. So, but I also brought food to Julia Butterfly Hill, who was up in the tree for I think 6 years, could be longer. But during that time, I was bringing her food, and she was protecting Luna, one of the last remaining old growth stands in the redwoods. And so part of my work was really, how do we protect our natural spaces, and what that looks like, so many different things. And so I worked with nonprofits for quite a while after I left university, after I left my undergrad. And then I did my master's in Australia in environmental science, and I started working with policy-based groups and more organizations that were doing outreach around how do we change systems, like overall, how do you change policy on a government basis? And then I also worked with community groups in water and water infrastructure. And then I kind of got disillusioned with working with nonprofits for a while and moved into advertising, and it was very eye-opening and awakening. And I worked in advertising for about 6 years, and then moved back and got the job with the Buckminster Fuller Institute, and that was really where my heart was.
Yeah,
that's like, how do you work with community groups in thinking and doing real powerful change-making work?
Yeah, and I really appreciate you're not coming in and just trying to like hand somebody a meal bag. There's so many ways of helping and supporting philanthropies and supporting, like gazillions of dollars go to like the Red Cross.
Right.
I really appreciate that what you're doing is in and of the community and building circular economies so that it's sustainable and enhancing life, as opposed to like spending money on handouts that just don't do what they're intended to do, which is, it's supposed to help, but it ends up can be really detrimental.
I mean, I think, what I call myself is a steward for systems change, because, or a catalyst for systems change and systems thinking, because honestly, I don't think we can really change things without changing the way people think, because it really starts from the ground up. Like, where is your thinking, and how does that lead to action, and how are we actually changing the way of being, as opposed to just creating these systems of I hate to call it handouts, because people do need to start somewhere. And if you're handing something out, hopefully you're inoculating that person with the fact that there's other ways of being and doing in the world, and catalyzing their will to do something. So,
is there a defining moment that was like a light bulb for you of this is the work, this is the dream, this is what you want to devote your energy to?
I wouldn't say there was a defining moment. I think it's been a progression throughout my life of, I guess that's not true. When I had my son, I realized that things can't continue to stay the way they are, and I want something better for. You're gonna make me cry.
I'm crying. No, you say that, I'm like,
yeah. I mean, that's where it started. Really, is it? When I realized that if he doesn't have the things that I had growing up, are you really gonna make me cry?
I know. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I realized that if he doesn't have the things,
I won't make eye contact for a minute. I'm gonna pour some more tea.
Okay. I feel like, just being able to provide him with the life that I had, and the connection to nature, and the connection to natural environments, and a stable climate that he can live in, and that thrive in, and have clean water and clean air and natural spaces with trees and beautiful plains and alive animals, and lush biodiversity and an ecosystem that's alive. I mean, that's what I'm fighting for. So I mean, all of my life I felt like it's been really important to give back, and I think this beautiful earth gives back to us on a daily basis. And if you put your hands in the soil, you can feel it. If you put your feet in the soil, you can feel it. But I feel like the defining moment was definitely when I had my son, and I wanted to shift what I was doing. I wanted to change something. You know, I don't know how much of that I'm actually doing on the ground. I mean, who can tell how much you're actually doing when we're in such a destabilized climate? But I feel like I'm doing my part, and I think that that's really a powerful place to sit. So
you're doing more than just one person's part, and you're leveraging your skills and history and experience and abilities to, you're not just, I'm going to make a garden.
right.
You're really working to change how we think about the land, and having active hand in like the photos of like the barren and then the lush are just so striking. And I hope I'm sure when in the film series that you're doing,
Right.
you'll be showing like this is a way
Right.
that we can fix some of what we've broken.
I mean, yes, and I wouldn't take credit for that. I would say that the communities that are doing that are on the ground, and I'm a steward for them. You know, I'm a catalyst for helping them to grow their work and their ability. And I feel like there's a lot of opportunity to actually shift the flow of capital towards organizations and communities that are doing this type of work. And that's where I utilize my privilege and my power, living as a white woman in San Francisco, where I have more access and I have more resources. I can shift the flow of resources and start to actually tell those stories. And I think telling the stories is one of the most powerful things that I can do, and identifying the projects and the people that are doing this work, and also realize that I am coming from a place of power, and shifting how I use that power towards a place that actually helps to kind of create like a catalyst for change to happen. And I mean, I could say a lot of us in these places of privilege feel like we're doing the work. And I believe that it takes a village. Nobody is doing the work alone. We're all working under, a collective guise of how do you actually work to shift this. Nobody's going to change the planet on their own. I mean, it's going to take all of us, honestly. We all need to be doing this work. And if we're not doing this work, then we're creating more harm.
Yeah. Coming from where you came from, off the grid, and now being in San Francisco, how do you connect those dots? Like, do you have rules that like we don't shop online or Amazon, or do you acknowledge that like, how do you think about it?
I mean, I think we're all kind of hypocrites in this system, and we're all connected and prisoners to capitalism. And I think it's something that is constantly eats at me, because we're living in a capitalist society where I live in a city that, I could be doing things very different, and I could not have a car, and I could not own my house, and I could, not ever buy from Amazon easily. I could easily not ever buy from Amazon. And I'm not doing that. I mean, just to be completely transparent and honest, we still have a car that runs on gas, and we have a house in the city where it's one of the most expensive cities in the world that we're living in. And we drive to nature. So I think it's hard. It's a hard place to be. And also I'm making these decisions. So the question is, why am I making these decisions, and how do I transition away from making these decisions as a thinking person? And I think it's, one step at a time, but it's also like, living with my choices and living with the decisions that I do make, and how to make those decisions a better choice for the next time I do make those decisions. So
yeah,
I think we're always grappling with that here. And I have friends that don't have a car, that only ride their bike, and they have children and they still leave the city. And I commend them. I mean, I think that's a beautiful thing. I have friends that never get on a plane and never fly and never use that carbon. And I also commend them. And I think I'm in a different place in my life right now. So
Yeah,
I grapple with that as well.
I appreciate that. It's it's humanizing, I think.
Totally.
I have a lot of admiration for a friend of mine who went through like everywhere that she and her husband have plastic in their lives, and what could they do instead?
Right.
So they're using those like beeswax food container wrappers and do not shop at Amazon, don't shop online at all.
I love that.
And I don't make those choices. I think it is a balance. So it's somewhere that I'm excited that there are alternatives and strive to make more of those choices. Amazon is not easy to find on my phone. That's been my it's not where I go first, but it is where I end up often if I can't find what I need easily.
Yeah, and I think we're all making personal choices. And I think, what if it wasn't easy to find Amazon? Where would you go to then? Would you still need the stuff that you get on Amazon? Would that be as important? I mean, I think
I probably wouldn't have nearly as many costumes.
I love that.
And I probably do not need nearly as many costumes as I now have.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I feel like, we're all making those choices. And I'm not one to say I'm living above others. I feel like I'm still learning. I'm constantly learning. I'm a student of life, and I'm constantly making those decisions and coming back on my decisions and saying something that I feel like I want to take away that I've said. And I'm constantly learning. I feel like every day is a new lesson for me. So, I mean, I am where I am, and I continue to grow and learn.
I love that. I think that's something that resonates with me. So tell me a little bit more about Regenerosity, where you are in the world, where your projects are. It's so cool, and I want to like paint a mental picture.
So in regards to Regenerosity, we are working across Brazil. We're just launching our Blossom program, which is a regenerative capacity building program where we support 4 to 8 different organizations. We're looking at a bioregional approach where each of these organizations will be based in a bioregion, and we've been really focusing around the outskirts of the Amazon and the biodiversity protected zones and protected areas around the Amazon. And these are really indigenous-based organizations or traditional Quilombola organizations that are working kind of at the threshold of biocultural restoration. And so that's what we're launching right now as we speak in Brazil. We also have another cohort that will be launching in early 2025 in East Africa, and that's really around disaster risk reduction and climate adaptation. So working at the threshold of refugee settlements, where similar to what we did before, where we worked with regenerative agriculture and building livelihoods and food sovereignty. So really around kind of how do you help support smallhold farmers in these areas to actually build a future, an economic future, but also like a livelihood, and continue to stay in the areas that they're in and thrive in those areas. And then we've worked in India in the past. One of the projects that we were speaking about earlier, Earth Forever, is based in the south of India. We worked with Vandana Shiva's organization, and she works with smallhold farmers as well, who are at the threshold of suicide, actually, from BT cotton. So helping to to bring back their farms in a more regenerative way. There's many different examples. We've worked in the Amazon. We currently have a flow fund, which is where you center activists and grassroots leaders at the center of the decision making, and we bring in the funding, and they make the decisions on how you distribute the funding. And so that goes from this small kind of root circle of funders to a large swath of, right now it's really focused on Indigenous women across 17 different territories.
That's amazing.
And they're doing everything from cultural restoration to bringing back the language to building small farms, whatever is needed in their area. So, and then we're also building this media series in the US, so working with farmers across the US.
Do you know where it'll be launched? Like what channels? Or
we're still working on the distribution plan for that, but hopefully, maybe, fingers crossed, like some of the short form Netflix series.
Yeah.
And working with Jubilee Justice, which is a Black-owned, Black-run SRI rice community that they're bringing back formerly enslaved farms, and working with Black farmers to kind of cultivate land and create justice within that land and reconnection.
Oh, that's incredible.
A lot of the communities that we're working with across the U.S. are just so incredibly powerful. So we're also working in North Dakota with an Indigenous group called Sikangu Awate, and they are based in North Dakota, and they're working with revitalizing the buffalo population to create food sovereignty in food barren lands where they live. So they've had a food sovereignty program, and they work with educators and youth and teach them about what good food is. They have a permaculture program there, which is really cool.
Amazing. And is this part of the FLOW framework?
No, this is part of the Liberation Agriculture Media Series. So this is like just working with the farmers to kind of share their stories and really educate general public around what's happening across the United States in agriculture.
Yeah.
And how are some of these like communities really working to change the dynamics of what agriculture and traditional agriculture is.
Yeah. So I didn't realize until recently that bison are so valuable to improving biodiversity metrics.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think that's really why Indigenous communities work so deeply with bison. You go to Yellowstone, and it brings back a lot of the native species when you have the I guess they're buffalo, the buffalo populations kind of reinvigorated. So,
yeah, that's incredible. Yeah. Tell me, what is a day like for you? I know you juggle a lot, and you have a lot on your plate. What does your day look like?
What is a normal day in Faith's life? So I wake up pretty early. I wake up at about 6, and then I often check my phone and check my schedule.
Right from bed?
Yeah, from bed. Definitely. And I have quite a few meetings in Africa, in the UK, in India. So those meetings usually start sometimes even before I take my son to school, which we take our sons to school very early.
Yeah.
But from there, I come back and I work from home, so I can kind of schedule my day however I want to. I juggle 2 different hats and 2 different jobs on a daily basis. So generally, I try to finish my work with Regenerosity by 10 in the morning, and then I move into my work with Spherical, which is a strategic design and integrative research regenerative studio. That
is a mouthful.
It is. It's an organization that supports county business organizations and nonprofits for building a tool called the Living Infrastructure Field Kit.
Yeah, I saw that on your website.
Yes.
It's super cool.
It is a pretty amazing tool. It's like a tool based on kind of like a reintegration of SimCity and using like GIS tools to map out infrastructure and the remedies that are needed for place. And we're really based in LA right now. We work with our partners, Accelerate Resilience Los Angeles, and they are both our funders and our partners, but work with them to kind of build our audience in LA. And so part of the tool, or a large part of the tool, is really to create kind of like a tool that's used for Measure W, which is part of the Safe Clean Water Act. So modeling water and bringing back water into the county of LA. And I work as the operations lead there. So I'm very close with the people. We've been growing quite a bit. The founders came from David McConville was the chair of the board at the Buckminster Fuller Institute. So I've known him and his partner, Don Danby, for around 6-7 years now. And the work that we're doing there is just incredibly powerful and really seated in doing on the ground regenerative work, which I love. So there's this kind of like, there's a real nexus at Regenerosity and Spherical, where I get to bring kind of my thinking into both places. And David and Don really work to inoculate the team with regenerative principles and everything we do. So
I love that. I am a visual learner, and on the website, how it was showing this is a part of LA, but what if there were green areas, and what if there was water, and what if there was like all this, and all of a sudden you have this, pollinator gardens, and you can see how you get from where we are today to where we could be tomorrow. And that you can fund, and it's people can put in projects or like submit or apply for projects for areas that they want to help get back onto a greener footing.
Exactly. And we're launching in October, so more people will know about the tool and can start to learn about it and utilize the tool for their own applications. And it's really based on the infrastructure bill and how LA County has like incorporated the infrastructure bill into bringing back the water and creating kind of opportunities and opportunity zones for county business organizations and nonprofits to actually utilize this funding to build living infrastructure.
That is amazing. I think it's so hard for here's the bill and here is what it does on the ground.
Exactly.
In a regenerative way, especially. I know when we were in Maine, we're like, God, the roads are so good in Maine. It's because they spent money to redo all the roads.
Yeah.
So there are great roads.
Yeah.
And that's not regenerative. So I'm glad that money is like coming from that to make some like sustainable improvements. Well, first of all, do you consider yourself like optimistic about where the world is, pessimistic about where the world is? Depends on the day, depends on the moment. Like how do you think about this?
I mean, I feel like in terms of optimism or pessimism, I feel like I'm a realist, and I do this work because we are in a serious time of change, and the climate is destabilized, and we call it climate change. But one of our board members at the Buckminster Fuller Institute used to call it climate destabilization. And he was like, the climate is always changing. The climate has been changing since the dawn of man and continues to change since the earth was alive. But we're in a time of climate destabilization, and unfortunately the earth is going to continue to go through these motions of changing in a way that is not beneficial to humans, and we're going to have to learn how to adapt very quickly to this. And so I feel like, I don't know if I'm optimistic or pessimistic. I feel like we just need to do something to ground us in resilience and adaptation. Because if we don't start to become more resilient as a human species, we're going to lose a lot of our species.
Mm-hmm.
And so what that looks like is a lot of different things. It's how do we actually do technology differently? How do we do agriculture differently? How do we actually grow our foods? How do we communicate? How do we travel? All of these systems need to change and to become more in line with that adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we live? How do we actually deal with our economy?
Yeah.
I mean, I think we're in a deep poly crisis right now, and it's really compounding. And I would love to say that, we have time to make these changes, but I don't actually think we do. Honestly, I think we need to change now, and we needed to change probably about 20 years ago, or even 50 or 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like urgency is now.
Yeah. The reason that when you were talking about your son, I started crying was because I have an 8-year-old, and for me, my like, shit, everybody should be doing this work.
Yeah.
If we're going to survive, was during the pandemic, during the wildfires, when our smoke alarm in San Francisco went off at 3 a.m, and my son Sawyer, who sleeps through everything, he slept through alarms before, but this time he woke up and he's like, what's happening? My throat hurts.
Yeah. And
it was a literal wake up for me of like, fuck, everybody needs to be solving this if we're gonna get there.
I mean, the other thing is we're all a part of it. Nobody's gonna hide from this. The climate is constantly changing. We're in a so-called safe space in San Francisco, and yet we're still, exposed to this in a lot of ways. And I feel like there's no turning our backs on the fact that the climate is going to affect everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And if it hasn't already.
And is. Like, I didn't know what AQI score was.
Totally.
Now I'm like, oh yeah, what's AQI score? Oh, it's only 60. Okay, all right. Well, we can go out. And and that is a crazy conversation to have. What is a pinnacle moment when you think about the work that you've done with Regenerosity around the world? And let's start low. What is a nadir, like, what is a big challenge, or what is a time that you were like, oh God, this is hard to keep doing?
Oh, I feel like I'm challenged all the time, honestly. I run at probably 90% most of the time, 90 to 100%, and sometimes 150%. And my partner is always like, you need to learn to chill. Because I work all the time. I literally work on weekends and at night, and I also know how to have fun. So I could go out and have fun, but I think this work is challenging. It's constantly challenging, and it's constantly in question of it. Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing enough? Am I actually changing the world for my son, for all of the youth of today, for the next 7 to 15 generations? How am I educating, my community, and how am I actually taking part in the things that are needed from me on the ground in my place? And so I feel like the challenge is, how do I become an octopus? How do I actually do all those things?
Yeah.
I mean, there's been big challenges as well that I've seen and we faced at work. One of the Flow Fund women, and I'm not so connected because I don't speak Portuguese, but on the ground in Brazil, was just killed as a rebel, indigenous activist. And I think that was a really big blow to us and to our community of Flow Funders. And I think, this is the kind of like visceral effects of working with the climate. There's so much pushback.
Yeah.
And so I think that there's challenges everywhere.
Well, now that we got that out of the way, tell me about like a pinnacle moment and what helps you maintain the resilience to keep doing this work.
I mean, I think I spoke about going to Uganda before. I think that was a really beautiful moment where I actually saw what was happening on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
I think watching movies is one thing, and seeing the videos and having these conversations is one thing, but to actually see change taking place on the ground
mm-hmm.
is really powerful. And I think that really opened my eyes to what is possible and understanding how much is actually shifting on the ground from grassroots organization happening. And so
I love that.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you want to share or highlight or discuss that we haven't talked about yet?
I would just say that, again, I'd love to iterate the fact that, we have all of the tools that we need to actually shift the trajectory of where we're going. And I think it's going to take all of us. And I think everybody needs to be on board. And just going back to what you were saying before, what are the personal choices that we're making in our lives? I think shifting those personal choices to be more earth friendly or regenerative or, in alignment and attuned with the earth is a really powerful thing to do. And I commend everybody that does that. And I look back at myself and I question myself, like, how can I do that on a daily basis? So
if somebody wanted to get into climate that's in advertising or doing something else in the world that and they're like, they hear this podcast and they're like, I gotta join the climate movement.
Right.
Do you have any advice for where people should look or how to break in? Because it feels like a pretty small community. It's growing.
Yeah.
But
I would start to research wherever your place is. If you're coming from the Philippines, I'm sure there's climate activists there. It depends on what you're interested in doing, but to tap into the climate movement, there is a climate movement everywhere in everybody's town. Even if it's underground and you're, Nebraska or Wyoming, there's still a climate movement there. And I think, stepping into kind of a place of how much action you want to take within that climate movement. There's so many different websites out there where you can actually still support and contribute in a way that in whatever way works for you. So I would say check out Regenerosity and check out the work that we're doing at Spherical. We're about to launch. Regenerosity is amazing. The Buckminster Fuller Institute has been doing really good work. Reach out to me if you have questions. I'm always happy to help.
With all of your spare time.
All my spare time. I do talk to a lot of people that are interested in the climate movement, and I think it's just a matter of what resources do I have to give them. So
and where people might contribute in a way that makes sense for them.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have one tip for people that don't want to like give up their day job but want to lean in a little bit more to climate resilience work?
I would say, one tip is make a personal change. Change where you're banking. Change where your money goes. Change what you're buying and how you're buying. Change the way that you're connected to the outside world in terms of like how we're utilizing our technology and turning on and off lights or keeping our house warm. Just make a change within yourself. I think that's the place to start.
Yeah, I love that. I'm thinking about for our family how we can not use Ziploc bags anymore.
We don't use Ziploc. I think it's a great change. Yeah.
We have a whole drawer with every size and they have a new size that I didn't even know existed. And now we have that too. So that's my
Personal
that we
change
want
is
to
really
work on.
important, and you could start, in any room in your house.
Well, this was an amazing conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca.
Thrilled. We laughed, we cried. This is I couldn't ask for a better first guest, and support of Marcela, our host, or our tech. What's your name?
Producer.
Our producer.
Excellent.
Yeah, this has been really special. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's really lovely to be here with you. You can find us on Instagram at Regenerosity. You can also find us on LinkedIn at Regenerosity. It's REGENEROISTY. And we also have a website called regenerosity.world, which we just launched.
Nice.
Thank you to Automatic. We got a pro bono website. So
awesome. Awesome. And we are, Instagram is at Trellis Workspace. And our website is trellis.social. And we are also on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for joining us for our very first episode of Badass Women in Climate. Bye-bye.